Welcome to the Broncos Podcast with Troy Renck. I'm your host, Troy Renck, columnist for the Denver Post. It is a wonderful day. It's the day after the schedule release. I know it got leaked out in drips and drops over the course of probably, several days, but the reality is it's out. We always knew who, now we know when. What does that mean for the Broncos as they try to unseat the Chiefs and end the Chiefs' 9-year reign atop the AFC West? Well, of course, I'm going to bring in my guys, Parker, Gabriel, and Luca Evans from the Denver Post. We're going to break down kind of what the schedule looks like, especially at the beginning, folks. A little brutal, not going to lie. What are some of the best games? And can they finish strong? And what will that look like? We'll give you our predictions as well. That's coming up after the break. Have you been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work? What are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hoggatt Injury Law a call. Their motto, with us, it's personal. That's because it is. You see him right there. That's my man, Darby Hoggatt. I've known Darby for years. We became good friends. Many of Darby's clients become his good friends. It's just how he is. You don't even have to pay Darby up front. If your case goes as planned, Darby will be the one writing checks to you. So again, if you've been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work, give Darby's team a call. That's 1-833-HOGGATT, 1-833-HOGGAT, or visit the website at hoggattlaw.com. All righty, folks. Welcome back to the pod. Again, I'm Troy Renck from the Denver Post, and I am happy to be welcomed again today by my guys from the Denver Post, our team coverage. That is Luca Evans and Parker Gabriel. They're coming to me live from parts unknown. Parker on baby duty, trying to talk softly. Luca getting in his early young beauty rest for the Nuggets game tonight. Let's see if I can scoot over to get in this shot. Guys, how you feeling? It's been a big couple of weeks. You had rookie minicamp in the schedule. How are you guys doing?
I'm good. I'm just the main thing that's taking it out of me is the long nights over at Ball Arena. So yeah, but Broncos are just running around trying to book travel and whatnot. So doing pretty good for the most part.
Young Luca was shook yesterday by the number of leaks on the NFL schedule. It's when you cover college, you might get the surprise announcement about USC and Clemson playing a 2-game series or something, Nebraska and Oklahoma. And then one day you're just like, oh, there's the Big Ten schedule for the next 4 years. Unlike the NFL where, it becomes like a week-long endeavor to try to figure out when even when you already know the teams. It's like, when are they going to play this? Are they going to London here? So it's always an interesting few days as the schedule unravels.
And then you have even teams and fans themselves leaking subtle images about who's gonna play in week what. Yeah, it's crazy world.
It's fascinating too because you already know the who. It's just the win, and they turn it into this highly rated program. It does make me wonder if they're going to eventually go to a draft lottery too, to take another day of TV ratings from everyone else. If they're going to, I don't think they need to in the NFL. I'd actually be against it, frankly, but because they don't really tank. It's harder to tank in the NFL because guys get hurt. It's way easier to do in basketball and certainly in baseball by just not playing anyone. But the NFL dominates the news cycle for 11 to 11 and a half months. It's what they do, and the schedule is a big part of that. The win is a big part of it, and part of it's because of fans. It's Broncos country, and Luca, you'll learn this. Well, you saw it with certainly USC, but their fan base travels, so it is a bigger deal here maybe than in some markets because every fan I know goes to at least one road game, and there's some that go to all of them. There's an orange pocket at every game. But this schedule this year is tough. I'd say it's definitely a top 10 tough schedule, not the toughest. And you're looking at a team last year that frankly didn't beat a lot of good opponents. They dominated the NFC South, and they need not apologize for that schedule they had. They earned it by stinking the previous year, 8-9. But we'll start with Parker, and I'll go right to Luca. Let's get just your initial reaction to the schedule, and then go micro, Parker, into that beginning, what that could look like. Let our audience know why it's important that the Broncos kind of hold serve, if you will, those first 6 weeks.
Yeah, I think my first impression seeing it was that I was surprised. We obviously knew the London game was week 6. And I was just surprised that the bye week wasn't right after that in week 7. It's in week 12. And so the way it sets up, 4 of 6 on the road to start, even though the AFC this year is the conference that has the 9 home games. So even with 9 at home and 8 on the road, they start out 4 of 6 on the road. So it's sort of like to me, it feels like it sets up like a risk reward schedule. Like you've got 5 division division games in the final 8 overall. And so if you navigate the first 6 or 7 and you get back from London and you play the next weekend and you're not worse for the wear because you're playing that next weekend instead of taking the bye week, then I think it sets up where you're going to get rest in December. You've got, big games against Kansas City and the Chargers down the stretch. Like it all sort of like opens up for the Broncos into this sort of land of opportunity if they navigate the first part of the schedule the way they need to. And I think sometimes we overblow this. Like last year, you looked at the schedule, they had that 2-game road trip to the East Coast. You're like, man, they got to start 2-0. Well, they started 0-2, then they won both those road games and they went 10-7 and went to the playoffs. So obviously it's a long season, but the way this one sets up is like with Indianapolis and with Tennessee at home and Indianapolis on the road to start, like those are a couple of games that it feels like you got to get because the going gets really tough from weeks like 3 through 6 with a combination of opponents and travel.
Yeah, as I bring in Luca, those first 6 games, folks, they open at home against Tennessee. That's a great opener against Cam Ward. First game that's against that Tennessee defense. That's a win for me. But then we go Colts at Colts, at Chargers, home on Monday night against the Bengals, and then to the Eagles, and then to the Jets in London. Luca, your initial reaction to the schedule, and again that first few weeks and not having a bye, I think is a gamble. I'm sure. I mean, Parker and I talked about this off air, but typically they leave that up to the teams if they want to bye after London. Maybe they didn't. I mean, I haven't confirmed that. Almost always is left up to the team if they want to come back and have a bye. What are your initial thoughts as you see this schedule, Luca?
Yeah, I mean, one thing on the bye, and obviously, like you said, Troy, I don't know for sure, but there is an advantage to theoretically having that later in the season when you're trying to make a playoff push, and so maybe that's part of Denver's rationale there. I think when you take a look, at the totality of the schedule, I think by like initial strength of schedule based on what teams' records were last year in terms of strength of opponent, Broncos are. I think they're in the top half of the toughest, schedules across the league. But I think it's more when you shake out, the timing of everything, like we were talking about. Obviously, that 4 of 6 stretch on the road is really tough. I think the toughest matchup for me is you fly to Philadelphia week 5, and then you roll right into going to London the following week, and then you don't have a bye coming off that. I mean, that's just kind of a brutal stretch. And then, theoretically finish with 7 of 11 at home, which is, a nice kind of segue, but there's still kind of landmines when you look at, the totality. I mean, they have Kansas City at home in week 11, and then after the bye, they go to Washington, play Jaden Daniels, and then even week 15 at home is the Packers. Week 17, obviously, they're heading to Kansas City on Christmas Day. So, it's not. There's a couple weak pockets where you can point out and say, okay, these are kind of a stretch of must win. A couple, but there's not really like an easy, lengthy stretch on Denver's schedule, and I think that's just kind of an interesting point as they try and build on what they did last year.
And listen, my general takeaway is this: that Sean Payton got what he wanted, guys. He wants high-profile games. He wants to travel. He feels like these trips. It looks like maybe no Greenbrier this year, but he likes these trips. The collegiate feel of taking a whole team away from their training, from their facility for a week, and they bond. And he didn't initially like that. He's admitted, but in his last few years with the Saints, London was a positive experience. Greenbrier last year certainly in some ways, I don't say saved their season, but definitely caffeinated their season. But Parker, he gets these high-profile games now. This is what he wants. For me, that's when we look at big games. And And I think, and I want to get your guys, because it may be a separate conversation off of this, but I think we're going to find out a lot about this Broncos team that Monday night against Cincinnati at home against probably, it'll be a top 5 offense again. Joe Burrow absolutely diced them last year. Poor Riley Moss. That is not the game to come back from knee surgery against T. Higgins. Because Moss had a really good year, folks. He did. He did not play well that night. And Joe Burrow was on an absolute heater. But when I look at early games that jump, because I don't want to get into all of it, but the big game for me early on is Bengals. Parker, will go to you, and then Luca. What are some of the the best games, big games for you when you take a look at the schedule? And if you want to bring up Chiefs, certainly you can. I didn't want to bring them up yet because they will dominate part of our conversation. But what are some of the games for you that jump on this schedule?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that 3-game stretch, right, out of the gate after the first 2, where you go at Chargers, Monday night against the Bengals, and then at Philly. Like, those are bangers, 3 in a row, like those are really good games. And so, like, that game last year, Troy, I mean, it kind of got, I think maybe it got lost a little bit because of the 2-point decision right at the end, Sean playing for overtime in Cincinnati, the playoff ramifications of that. But, like, when I think back to last year and, like, the sort of like the best moments of the season or the most entertaining moments of the season, like, you wouldn't normally think that a rainy night in Cincinnati in December, late December, would qualify. But that game was awesome. Like, It was the first time I've seen Joe Burrow play live. And, it was like he was 20 feet tall on the sideline every time Denver had the ball, like just looming sort of, right? And the offense is amazing. In Denver, like I wrote this, I think, in our schedule stuff yesterday, like the reason why Denver signed Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga and the reason they drafted Jahdae Barron at number 20 is for games exactly like that one. Right. Like, it's for games like that. It's for games like Philly. And then obviously for Mahomes and all that, but they've really done Vance Joseph has more or less like done as good a job as anybody in the league on Mahomes over the years, structurally, schematically. Like, they need dudes for games like the Bengals, the Eagles. Like, that's where it's at. And so, like, to me, not only are those good litmus tests of just sort of like where you're at program wise, but watching this defense that's supposed to be one of the best in the NFL get those 2 tests back to back early in the season should be awesome.
What do you think, Luca? What do you jumps best games for you? This will be your first experience of covering Broncos, both home and some on the road. What jumps for you, my man?
Yeah, I got a couple. I mean, right after Cincinnati, obviously you had to Philly, and I think that's just a classic. What happens when you mash one of the best defensive lines in the NFL against that offensive line that Philadelphia has? Obviously, a little bit of offseason change for Philly after they won the Super Bowl, but I think to Parker's point, like, that is a game that you sign Dre Greenlaw and Hufanga for. Like, that is you're gonna need playmakers to make plays against Saquon Barkley, against Jalen Hurts, especially at their respective positions up the middle. And I think that is just going to be, a really pivotal moment. In addition, just a really pivotal 2-week stretch for Vance Joseph's defense and for the additions that they made and for those guys. And then I think down the line, you look at kind of the way there's almost 2 blocks of the schedule where you have that first initial run, and then you get into this stretch kind of week 7 to 10. You get the Giants at home, you get the Cowboys at home, at Houston, you get the Raiders at home, where conceivably you're like, okay, like, you got to go at least 3-1 in that period. And then you come to week 13 at Washington, and that's kind of like a swing game to me, almost like that, reasonably that could influence, hey, you're in really good position for the playoffs, or you're kind of fighting, to scrap. And that just, Jaden Daniels against Bo Nix, obviously the storyline there, but, Washington's just a really good up and coming team. And that, I think, could set the tenor of how we view the last stretch of the season.
And I think both those teams, guys, you correct me if I'm wrong, are both coming off a bye leading into that game. So they'll be fresh, hopefully. I mean, that's a time where that is where what Luca brought up earlier. The late bye kind of stinks, if I'm being honest, because sometimes you need that a little earlier just to kind of reset from a long training camp. But it does help you down the stretch if you have a couple of key players to buy a week right there, and then they don't practice until later in that week. So you're essentially buying like 10 days of rest for a guy can be huge. That's a big game. And at that point, Washington's played, 4 or 5 primetime? I mean, I think they're second in primetime games to the Chiefs maybe. I think Chiefs play 7 this year. So, I mean, Washington's they're not going to flinch, not with Jaden Daniels, but they have holes too. I mean, I love Washington. I do. But as of last year, you could score on them. It's not like you look at them like Philly's a tough game with Fangio and his scheme and that crowd. And, that's a game you get behind early and you lose, 34-10 if you're not careful. Washington feels like you can be in a shootout with them. I mean, again, we're talking about a game that's months and months away, but those are the kind of, as Luca brought up, swing games in a schedule. Because when you look at this Broncos schedule, if they're going to win their first division title since 2015, and yes, I'm that old, Luca. I was covering the team that year when they won the Super Bowl. That's when how Mahomes is now is how Peyton Manning was and how John Elway were when they were on the Broncos. They'd win division, they'd fall out of bed and win 10, 12 games every year. But this year, I believe they have a realistic chance to dethrone the Chiefs because of the Chiefs' schedule. The Chiefs' offensive line has issues still. I just feels like the Chiefs are coming back to the pack. Now, I understand the Chiefs are going to be picked to win it, as they should. They've won 9 straight. But let's go to the Chiefs games. Is it your guys' opinion that if the Broncos are going to win the AFC West, they have to split with the Chiefs? What is a record in the AFC West that can win you the division of those 6 games? Because, it won't be easy. Chargers are a playoff team. Chiefs are obviously a Super Bowl team. And the Raiders are going to be better. I don't know how much better, but I guarantee you a lot of the dumb stuff they've done over the years is going to go away with Pete Carroll as head coach. So what about, let's talk Chiefs, and what is an AFC record? Luca, go first.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I think you have to have a winning record in the division. I mean, certainly above 500. I that Christmas game, that Week 17 game, Christmas night is going to be in Kansas City is going to be really brutal. And I think you have to win. I don't know if you have to win both. I will say I think you have to win the one at home in Week 11. And not put yourself in position where you need that Week 17 game in some capacity, as desperately as you do. And I think I have a feeling like the Raiders are gonna take one, this year. I think they'll split the Raiders series. I just think that, they're gonna have a game where Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers go off and Pete Carroll, is coaching those dudes. So I think, realistically, I think you need, again, above 500. But my thoughts, I think, are you need that Week 11 game to put less focus on Week 17.
So by Luca's math, Parker, he's going to have them sweep the Chargers if they split with the Raiders and Chiefs.
Yeah, that's true.
It's funny because the Chargers swept them last year. Both games, well, the first one didn't feel winnable. The Broncos were losing like 20-0 at half at home. The second one clearly was winnable, where they were up. The Chargers, that's where, you guys have both brought up the offseason additions. They got just absolutely blitzed in the middle of the field. They had no answers for the middle of the field and Justin Herbert. But again, for me, I think you can win it at 4-2. You can win the division, but one of those you have to split with the Chiefs, obviously, to have a chance for that. Parker, what do you see in the AFC West? What's a realistic record? And if Luca's right, and the reason I'm not dismissing what Luca says, the Broncos until last year had never won in Vegas. I mean, they sucked in Vegas. They got their butt kicked. It wasn't like they weren't winning there. So they finally win. Bo Nix plays well, and again, that Raiders team at that point was not great, but they competed. I'll give them that. But what do they need to do to win the AFC West, and how important? How do you see those Chiefs games breaking down, Parker?
Yeah, they got 2 with the Raiders obviously this year, and they see Josh Jacobs when Green Bay comes to one of the all-time or at least modern era Broncos killers there in Josh.
He and Max Crosby. Holy crap! Yeah. When they go into the Hall of Fame, they'll be first person they think of the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, that's right. I think 4-2 is possible. Like here's how I think about it. Like I think about it sort of like both sides of the coin. 4-2 seems feasible to win the division, mostly because, the Raiders aren't just liable to take one off the Broncos. I mean, they're a tougher out for the Chargers in Kansas City too. Like there's a baseline competency there. I would be surprised if there's not a baseline competency there. With Pete Carroll in there as the coach, Geno Smith's not great, but he's a huge upgrade over what they've had the last couple of years. They've got the young skilled talent, obviously with Genty and Bowers. And so like, they're going to be a tough out. Like, I think they've had a really good offseason. They're not all the way rebuilt, but like, I think they've had a good offseason. So in that regard, like if it's all around, like if the Chiefs don't just waltz to 5-1 or 6-0, like then, 4-2 might put you in the conversation. You obviously, I think you got to beat Kansas City at least once. But like the flip side of that coin, Troy, is that Patrick Mahomes is 35-5 against the division in his career.
That feels good.
He's lost 5 times against the division since he took over as the starter. And so if you're talking about, losing 3 games in the division or even 2 games in the division and still winning it, he's sitting there going like, yeah, I mean, that's like 4 years for me worth of losses in the division. So part of me thinks, 4-2 could get it done. Part of me thinks if you're like, we're going to go take the division, I mean, you better go 5-1. Like I just don't see, Kansas City obviously plays the first place schedule and they've got a tough one and they're in prime time a lot. They're playing like every day of the week and twice on Tuesday or something. But like in order to put your stamp on it, like I think at 4-2, you need some help along the way. You need, an injury or whatever. But like, so you're going to have to, someone's going to go 5-1 in the division. That's the way it feels. Because there's 3 teams that are capable seemingly of doing it with Denver, Kansas City, and the Chargers.
Yeah, that's the issue. Is it's a little bit of that SEC feel. How much do they beat each other up? Yep. AFC conference record becomes a tiebreaker. Then here's what I'll say about the Chiefs, because no one has chronicled more Chiefs losses. I think I've seen 11 straight losses at that stadium because I watched CU get killed by Kansas last year at Arrowhead. Regardless, the Broncos had lost 16 straight to the Chiefs, and everyone knows that. But I'm like, hey, they're 2-2 in their last 4. They're 2-2 in their last 4. I get Carson Wentz and a bunch of guys that are plumbers now played in that last game. Not the Broncos' fault. They beat them 38-0. It's not the Broncos' fault they played the NFC South last year. Luca brought up that portion of the schedule where you get like Giants and Cowboys and Raiders. That's your NFC South portion of the schedule. You have to dominate that portion of the schedule. But what Parker's saying about Mahomes, part of the reason and this was the same stats you saw with Manning, when they get so good, they absolutely crush their division. And when you have a great quarterback, you win on the road. That's my experience from covering Elway and covering Manning. And hopefully you'll see this with Bo Nix, is they can beat good teams on the road. When you don't have a quarterback, you don't win on the road. And you certainly don't beat good teams on the road. And that's where you think the Broncos can make that next step. It's frankly why I thought they would do a little more in the draft for Bo Nix. I know last week, and I want to bring this up because we want to finish with the schedule, but RJ Harvey popped at rookie minicamp. Quadzilla. Did I underestimate him? Can he be this X factor? Because I think that to me is the difference. Their defense is going to be good. You guys can both jump in, whatever. Is Harvey maybe a little better than certainly I thought? Now, again, I thought he would start, but are we looking at a guy that is going to be in the running for a Rookie of the Year vote or two? Because if we are, the idea of them winning the AFC West starts to crystallize. I can see it. If he's not good and they're rotating 4 backs, then they're going right back to that number where they're flirting at 9 and 10.
I mean, Parker and I were talking about this on a Denver Post pod this week. Like Sean Payton said, RJ Harvey he's going to play on 3rd down. And I think it's very clear that, at least right now in an ideal world, they view he should be the focus of that room in some respect. And I think what he showed at minicamp, the most important thing, he does have, Sean Payton and George Payton said, he's got soft hands that, guy didn't drop a ball. And, I think he is a lot more upside flashing out of the backfield than we saw in college. I think just in general, he went a little under discussed because UCF, that's not a great year and just did not have as much buzz as some of the other backs in the class. And I think when you start to look at all these different pieces in a vacuum, like the pick, especially late 2nd round, makes a lot of sense. And so The one thing that we don't know is pass pro. Again, Parker and I were talking about, like, I think Sean, he didn't necessarily say that RJ Harvey was good or great in pass pro. He just said, guy like Darren Sproles, he used to tell him that, yeah, he mentions Darren Sproles every time he talks about RJ Harvey now. But, talked about how he used to occasionally, Darren Sproles used to get matched up against, Navarro Bowman and the great linebackers. And he would say, I'm not going to make you do that every, a bunch though, essentially. And so I think, that's how they view him. I think realistically, if he is that guy who gets, somewhere between 200, 250 touches, like, yeah, he's got a shot at picking up a couple Rookie of the Year votes. He's got really quick feet too.
Yeah, when you see the jump cut, like that was the one thing. Like, there's some video just of individual drills, and obviously, like, we all know that's not the end all be all, right? Like, individual drills in mid-May before you even get going, and OTAs and into training camp before the pads come on. But like, you can see the juice. Like, that's the thing. I mean, he certainly moved differently than any of the other backs they had in minicamp, which you would expect from a second rounder. I think, how Troy, remember like a couple years ago, it just was like every time Jaleel McLaughlin touched the ball, you were like, oh yeah, that guy's going to make the team, like pretty much from the start. And he was undrafted. Like this, I think of RJ Harvey just on one day, like the initial impression was sort of like second round version of that. Like, not the same, he's bigger than Jaleel. He's much more powerful than Jaleel, but the movement skills, the jump cut, the vision, and then the hands, like you saw just standing there watching for a couple hours, like, oh yeah, you see what they like about him. Now, does that mean he's going to have 80 catches or all that stuff? Like, obviously there's a long way to go on that, but a long way to go on that. But the early return is like, yeah, you can see it. And then the other thing I think is, like, you saw flashes from Audric Estime over his rookie year. Obviously, there was times where it was, you furrowed your brow more than once, Troy, about what it was going to take to get him on the field. But I think you can squint and see a sort of ideal 1-2 punch with those two guys. Right. Like the traits and the this and the that, like, it's all kind of there. Now, again, will it materialize? Talk to me in 6 months, I guess. But like, you can see, to use the Sean Payton term, the vision for having, whatever, like Ingram and Kamara-esque. Like, neither of the Broncos guys right now are in the realm that those two guys were in when they were in New Orleans. But body type wise, skill set wise, like, you can see how the two guys the Broncos have are sort of like, yeah, this looks and feels like a Sean Payton backfield duo.
Yeah, and I caution people with Estime, if you want to give up on him, he was 20 years old when he got drafted.
Right. Yeah.
There was some immaturity issues, not like off the field, just like being a pro, like what it understood. You can't put the ball on the ground. You don't get second chances. Like, it just, Notre Dame, the guy didn't need Siri to find the end zone. He was going to play every down, and he got here. He's a younger guy, and maybe you just don't understand the sense of urgency that you got to go in with few opportunities to compete. But he did show that at times, and he is an absolute load at the goal line. So I do think there's a way to combine those two. Harvey needs to get the bulk if he's going to be the player they want him to be. But maybe Estime is just an absolute force at the goal line. And maybe against certain teams, Estime gets 18 and, Harvey gets 12 touches, and he's more of a factor in the passing game. They need more weapons. I mean, we understand that, and Evan Ingram is going to solve some of that, and maybe Devon Vele takes another step forward, or Pat Bryant's better than I think, but they're not winning late, and that's where we'll finish this, guys, late in that schedule without being able to run the ball. They're just not. And Luca brought up Christmas in Kansas City. I'm pretty sure I'd rather have someone rub a cheese grater across my shins than spend another Christmas in Kansas City. The last time I was there was Kerry Kubiak's last game coaching there, and it came out that he was retiring/leaving, and they got absolutely smoked. I've had so many bad experiences over the last 9 years covering Broncos teams on Christmas Eve or Christmas. I think it's five Christmas games I've covered. And then throw in like 3 Christmas Eve games, which one was in Washington, where they lost to an atrocious Commanders team. I think they were still the Redskins then. And then remember the Patriots? That was at home. The Patriots lost a couple years ago, Parker.
I was going to say, Troy, I've been on the beat 3 years, and I saw the debacle on Christmas Day in Los Angeles that got Hoggatt fired when they were
fighting on the sideline
before the year, and then like Ray Jackson had his arm around Randy Gregory, because Randy was like went in the game just to get in a fight, and then that was Luca. You would have died in the locker room. Randy, he didn't talk. And then he was walking out, and everyone was sort of looking around like, what, he's not going to talk? And he turned around, and he said, if you want to know if I punched him in the mouth, hell yeah, I did. He walked out. And then he was
awesome. That's awesome.
Last game of the year. And then, there was that. And then there was the New England game 2 years ago.
They had to win against a sorry-ass New England team.
Yeah.
And they lose at the buzzer.
Yeah. Bill Belichick literally played for overtime. They ran the ball on first down and got 6 yards with the clock running, and Sean took a timeout to try to get the ball back, and Belichick was looking around like, okay. One pass, kicked the field goal, won, and the playoff dream was over, basically.
Yeah. So you forgive us all if when we look at the schedule in around Christmas Eve, we don't think of great thoughts because, the funniest one I've covered was the one against the Rams. It was funny in a horrific type of way, but it was the SpongeBob game with Patrick Starr. If you watch the coverage when Russell threw that interception to Bobby Wagner, and you're like, oh, the SpongeBob character. I mean, it just fit so snugly with that season as Hackett's walking off the field, and it feels like he's going to get fired. He's walking off the field, and behind him, Randy Gregory's going Marvin Hagler throwing punches in the thank you line. I mean, in the congratulatory line. I mean, that and Dalton Reisner pushed down.
Brett Rippon
on the sideline. I mean, Oh my God. I mean, you can't play worse than they played in that game, and you can't have more drama. And that will not happen under a Sean Payton team. He might be screaming at someone. Right. When was the Lions game? Was that Christmas Eve too?
No, that was like mid-December. That was a Saturday. Okay. That was just a mere Saturday night in mid-December in Detroit a couple years ago.
I was like, that would have fit in nicely with their fabric of December 24th, 25th games I've covered. And I think you guys will be looking this up. But I did this when I was at Denver 7 a few years ago. I believe the Broncos are something like 3-20, 3-21 in December in Kansas City all time. I mean, their record in Kansas City and Denver in December is horrific. And some of that's weather. Some of it's Chiefs having great teams. I mean, but that's a really difficult place to win in December. It's why you got to win, for me. That game at home almost is a must-win if you're going to win the division. So we'll finish with that. Like, finishing strong, you guys brought it up. I mean, it's going to be tough because you're at Commanders. That could be a swing game. That's a Sunday night football game. At Raiders, home against the Packers, home against the Jaguars. Hopefully Travis Hunter's healthy and we get to see him. At Kansas City, and then you finish at home against the Chargers. I mean, that's tough. But you have a little bit of reset leading into that. I think they can go 11-6. I'm going to put my prediction out there. Guys, I know what yours were. I read the paper, I promise. But what do you see as your prediction? You guys just jump in and talk among yourself. What do we got for a final tally?
Go, Luca.
I think we both went 10-7, right, Parker? Yeah. I mean, theoretically, I think I wrote this, but, on paper, they should be better than they were last year, especially if Bo Nix continues to take a leap. I just think the way that this schedule shakes out, it's never a good thing to have your arguably two toughest stretches at the front end and at the back end. And I just think that is, and the quality of some of the swing games, the Washington game, obviously the Chiefs game, week 17, like even, like Packers at home, finishing with the Chargers at home, like there's not much margin for error really at any point in this schedule. The division is so tough that I think it makes it hard for me to see them realistically only losing 5 or 6 games this year, and I still think 10-7, I still think they'll reach the playoffs, but again, there's just so much variance. I think that could happen in kind of those first and back half stretches that's why I had them a win lower than you, Troy.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I wrote probably something similar, that I think they could be demonstrably better than they were a year ago and finish with the same record. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like, we spent 35 minutes mostly talking about the schedule, and it's like, maybe one passing reference to them playing Dallas at home. And like, not only is that a marquee game because the Cowboys are the Cowboys, but like also that's a really, really talented team. Like they've been sort of a train wreck. Obviously they haven't won a playoff game or a division game in like since even like before Troy was covering the NFL. But
I was covering that 96 when they last were good. I covered that Super Bowl in Arizona.
Hey, so
I'm like 75 years old.
Not quite pre rank, but yeah, I mean, but like that's so even that like it's not like when that week rolls around, if Dak's healthy and that they're playing the way they should be playing, like they're gonna come here and everyone's gonna be looking around going like, wow, that is a difficult home game. So it's certainly not an easy schedule. There's no such thing in the NFL, obviously. I think, Troy, one thing that I was thinking about as we were talking about, especially about Kansas City, like sometimes I roll my eyes when Sean, you try to ask about Bo and he talks about everything else when he's like, you help a quarterback by running the football and playing good defense, but like that really is it. Like, and you feel that with this schedule, especially the last two games with Kansas City and the Chargers. I think one of the things that goes underrated about that 2-2 stretch against against the Chiefs, the last four, is that, Vance has just done a hell of a job, like 2 offensive touchdowns for Kansas City the last 4 games they've played against Denver. Obviously, Wentz played one of those games and they didn't score, but like you're talking about 2 touchdowns and like 7 field goals or 8 field goals in the 3 games that Vance has, coached against Mahomes and Andy Reid since he came back here as a defensive coordinator. And so to me, it's like, if you can run the football and you play defense like that the last 2 weeks against Kansas City and the Chargers, like you're going to be in position to get where you want to go. Like in some ways, obviously you got to do your work in the other 15 games, but like in some ways, like if the defense is in good shape and they're relatively healthy and they run the football the last 2 weeks of the season, that's going to give you a fighting chance, I think, to accomplish the things you want to accomplish.
Well, again, when they won it in 2015 and they ended up winning the Super Bowl, that defense scored 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Their defense was like their 3rd best, 4th best offensive player. Maybe we see that because last year we saw the sacks, 63 sacks. Maybe with the speed in the middle of the field, the Greenlaw and Talanoa, that all of a sudden the takeaways not only go up, but some of those go the other way. And that's how you beat a good team on the road. You pick up a fumble, a pick 6. That's how. It's not going to be Bo Nix lining up scoring 32 points in December in Kansas City. That's not realistic for me. The idea of this defense causing havoc and just being a wrecking ball, that is on paper certainly possible. And as you mentioned, Vance Joseph dialed it in last year. They dropped their fangs. They played downhill. They punch people in the mouth. We saw it in that Jets game. For me, that's kind of when the Tampa Bay game was a marvel. And you're like, maybe there's an anomaly. Maybe Tampa sucks. And they just caught them looking past them. And they had a couple of really key injuries. But that Jets game, first freaking play of the game, he sends Sternad on a blitz.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a defense that's playing to punch you in the mouth and beat you. And now they're better personnel-wise. And let's not forget, Luca and Parker, Sean Payton picked a fight with Kansas City at that end-of-season press conference.
Yes, he did.
I know. I was looking back at that, and I was like, oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Like, if we'd have won that game, we felt really, really, really good about that next week. I was like, okay. And, again, I love it. I mean, we root for the story, folks. But Kansas City still won 9 straight AFC West titles.
Right.
And you picked a fight with them now. You pushed your chips on them now. And I'm not saying they didn't want to beat them before, but I guarantee you in the middle of that stretch of 16 wins against them, they viewed the Broncos as a homecoming opponent on several of those because they were terrible. Now we got a grudge match here, boys. We got something.
Guys, I can't believe we've gone this whole time without talking about the Giants in Week 7. And Russell
Wilson, maybe.
Russ part 2, maybe.
Russell, maybe.
Russellmania. The Russellmania has lost some steam around here, Luca.
I like Russ. I figured.
It's just now he's on his 2nd team since leaving. And I don't mean to, it always sounds like I have an issue with Russ. I don't. I think he's a Hall of Famer. For me, it was a modern-day Roger Staubach for a decade. And if you look at his stats, he has a strong, strong case for the Hall of Fame, statistically and winning the Super Bowl and going to 2. But to me, his days as a starting quarterback are numbered. And I'm not sure we won't. I'll say this, Luca. If you really dig deep into that Giants roster, you will be rooting for Jameis Winston to start in that game, because that was easily the most exciting game we covered last year, was Jameis Winston with the Browns, the Jerry Jeudy legacy game, which probably in some ways led to the Jahdae Barron pick. But that, Parker, might have been the craziest game you've ever seen, where Jameis Winston at any point was going to throw a touchdown to either team for the span of 2 quarters.
That's just Jameis Winston throughout his career.
Wasn't it after that game when he said that he was praying to the Lord to deliver him from throwing pick sixes? Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, guys, you guys are the best. Broncos, again, it's a tough schedule. It's a fun schedule. We got London. I cannot wait. That's a fun trip. That was the highlight of the schedule a couple years ago, a game they won against the Jaguars. We go to a new stadium in the Tottenham Hotspurs, I think it is, stadium. So, it is, but there's some challenges along the way. And Sean Payton has kind of puffed his chest out. He's picked a fight. He has set this year up in his own way to take that next step, which would be a division title. Because that's how you start making ground, is you have to host a playoff game. You can't be on the road at Baltimore. You can't be on the road at Buffalo and have a better season than last year, because it's just going to end the same way for me. But they got a chance. Luca, Parker, thank you so much. Again, I couldn't do this pod without Darby Hoggatt of Hoggatt Injury Law, and of course, Danny Bailey behind the screen, and Mile High Sports. Broncos country, I do this pod for you. Happiness, that begins with me. Go out there and have a great day.